right, guys, welcome to a special live edition of Brazil Bound presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage. This is the 31-hour tailgate ahead of the U.S. and Ghana game. We're thrilled to be here. Happy Father's Day to everyone. I should say Happy Father's Day to everybody out there, including my dad. And, of course, Happy Father's Day to the guys on the panel. Jesse Marsch, former assistant coach for the U.S. men's national team at World Cup 2010. And Simon Borg, senior editor here at MLSsoccer.com. And, of course, welcome in Greg Lalas and his baby, our new touchscreen.
Yeah, this is a new baby. I'm a father today in some ways. This is our new baby. We're going to play with this a little bit today.
Right. Be very gentle, Greg. I don't know if you've handled children. I'm sure you have, actually. All right, there's a lot to get to in this show. We're going to have Andrew reporting in from Natal. We're also going to have fan questions. We are also going to give stuff away. And this is how easy it is to win stuff on the show. We want your questions and comments. It's actually going to get more difficult after this. But to show you how easy it is, we're going to give something away to Caleb for the first comment of the day. He said, "I'd like to win something." Okay, Caleb, you've won something. We will send you some cool World Cup swag from Castrol. There's plenty more to be had. You can tweet at MLS with any questions or comments. They're already coming in for the guys. We have the experts here. Plenty to talk about as we look at this U.S.-Ghana game. So, guys, let's take a look. These are teams that have history. I mean, Jesse, you were a part of it in 2010. Yeah. Ghana has beaten the U.S. in the last two World Cups, including knocking them out in 2010. Does this history play into this game at all? Does it mean anything?
Well, I think you can look at it from two angles, and you can look at it from Ghana's angle and say they've been successful in recent history and they've been on top of the U.S., although close games, I will add. Or you could look at it from the U.S.'s perspective and say, you know what, we might be the underdog here, but now we're ready to set the score straight, and this time it means even more.
So you don't think there's any psychological baggage here? I think going into a game, knowing you've lost the last two and knowing how you've lost those last two games, I think if the U.S. goes down in this game, I think, that history really weighs on them really heavily.
Well, the guys that have been a part of it before are guys like Timmy Howard, Michael Bradley, and Clint Dempsey. And I feel like when you're going into an important game, you want these guys on your side, and they're not going to back down. And even in the toughest moments, that's when they're at their best.
All right, guys, I'm sorry. I have Caparini in my mouth, but
nice.
I need to swallow before we move on. I want to talk about the factors in this game, and everybody now talking about the main factor being the weather. It's been pouring in Natal. We have a Twitter question that came in from Caleb, and he said, how do the weather conditions affect the game plan? Will it benefit the U.S. or Ghana? It makes the speedy counterattack more difficult. So, Jesse, who do you think this favors?
Well, it's a tough one. The fields have been a little bit soft, and it's been raining in a lot of the games, but I think they've held up pretty well. And what you've seen are some fast games, okay? So the ball's moving fast. There's good combinations. There's a lot of aggressiveness in the attack. Ball's getting whipped in. So actually, I think for soccer moments, that'll favor the U.S. and their ability to move the ball. But the biggest concern I would have is on all the 50-50s. So on wet days, a lot of times you have more 50-50 battles. So you're talking about foot races, jumping and heading, and battles in the box. And that's where I think Ghana will have a little bit of edge in the weather.
And it makes it that much harder for guys like Jeff Cameron and Matt Beasley, the central defenders, to now track guys running at them. But if it's a faster game, doesn't that favor Ghana? Because if it's a track meet going back and forth, I think Ghana wants that.
Well, again, it depends on if it's an open fast game or if it's a fast soccer game with a lot of good passing and good movement, okay? Because however the game plays out in that manner, I think will dictate who's in favor.
Guys, I think one other thing to think about is how is the field going to hold up? Because if the field starts getting choppy with all the rain or waterlogged in that way, does it slow the game down to such an extent that I think maybe the U.S. does have an advantage because it removes that speed that perhaps Ghana might have?
It'll be something to keep your eye on, for sure.
Well, guys, when you look at the odds makers and who people think are going to win this game, Ghana seems to be the favorite. When you look at the betting sites, not that I'm looking at the betting sites, but if I were to, Ghana is favored in this game. Do you think Ghana should be the favorite? Is that accurate when you look at these two teams? Because when you look at the world rankings, the FIFA rankings, it's not even close. The U.S. is way ahead of them. So tell me, why is Ghana considered the favorite here?
Well, I think we can all acknowledge that the FIFA rankings aren't the most accurate guide we've ever seen. But for me, I think that Ghana is the favorite. And I think it's mostly because their players play at big clubs in Europe, play big games week in and week out, play Champions League. So they're used to playing in better games at higher levels with more pressure.
But if you were to ask folks in Europe or in South America which country they think is more advanced soccer-wise, I think they're going U.S. And I think the U.S. better feel like you're the favorite going into a matchup against any African side. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Well, I don't necessarily think that it's about, are they the favorite? What are they? I think it's about now the mentality of what gets put on the field. So the two mentalities, Ghana's confident and cocky, and the U.S. has core belief in who they are and what they're about. So I think it'll be a little bit of battle of mentalities, too.
But when I look at this matchup, there is plenty more pressure on the U.S. than on Ghana. I mean, we've seen some of the African teams come out, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, they come out, they're casual. It's almost like they don't have real pressure on them.
Well, that's how they play. That's inherently who they are and how they play.
Right, and I think so Ghana, you going into a game with no pressure, I think that just psychologically sets itself up better. I think the U.S. have the pressure. I think they are the bigger country, a lot more resources, the better domestic league even. I think they're the ones feeling like they're the favorites.
Guys, one guy who thinks the U.S. don't stand a chance here, of course, is Andre Ayew. Came out yesterday and he said, if we are all fit and we are 100% healthy, there is no way we are not going to win this game. That's some bulletin board material, and I assume they have bulletin boards in France where he plays. That's not something you commonly see right before a World Cup game.
Again, it feeds into the cockiness of Ghana, and they believe that, okay? And again, that can be their biggest strength, and it can be their biggest weakness. And we're going to see exactly. If now let's go the other scenario. Let's say the U.S. goes up 1-0, okay? And now all of a sudden Ghana's looking around, and they're pointing fingers and wondering what's going on. How do they respond? And is the U.S. able to really jump on that, make it 2-0, so on and so forth?
But I just believe that those past matchups, they haven't been results that have made the U.S., feel hate towards Ghana. I don't know that there's that edge going into this game. I almost feel from the outside that, there's almost like a little bit of fear, maybe, from the U.S. side with Ghana in terms of, they know they're fast, they know they're quick, they know they play at high levels. And based on what's happened before, I don't know the U.S. can really get angry about the history.
I think that's more in the psyche of the fans and the people than it is the players. I think the players are going to step on the field, have confidence in who they are, and they're going to be ready to go.
Guys, talking about the psyche of people, we've heard a lot about Jurgen Klinsmann and what he's been saying regarding the U.S. team and what they can do in the World Cup. I mean, him coming out and saying the U.S. can't win the World Cup. Does that factor into the mentality of the players on the field?
I mean, I think to some extent, it can be a motivational thing where the players want to show Jurgen Klinsmann that, we can win the World Cup. But at the same time, I'm in Klinsmann's camp on this one. I think if you're part of a country that hasn't ever been to a semifinal, let alone a final, you cannot go into a World Cup saying, we can win the World Cup. So I'm in Klinsmann's camp on that. And I think the expectations in the United States are way unrealistic going in. I mean, if you go to the streets in New York and you ask Americans about the U.S. the World Cup's here, U.S. is going to win it, right? I think you'll hear a lot of that. And it's unrealistic.
I would hope that's what our Americans think, and our studio audience that's here as well. The other quote that I wanted to get to about Klinsmann, though, is him coming out and saying that this, essentially, against Ghana, is a knockout game. What does that do to the psyche of the team? What if they don't win? What if they tie this game?
Well, here's my fundamental problem with the first comment and the second comment, all right? Neither of them really need to be stated, and they only put pressure on the team. Take the tournament one game at a time, all right? It's not like we're going to look at it and go, all right, we're shooting for 7 straight games. Take one game at a time. Play against Ghana. Play your best match. Put your best team on the field. Get the tactics right. Then once you deal with that game, hopefully get a win, then you move on to the next game. And it doesn't make the next game any easier or any harder based on the approach in the first match.
In other words, Jesse, you want Jurgen Klinsmann to go and watch Bull Durham, right?
Well,
just glad to be in the show. We're taking it one game at a time. We're hoping we can move on.
I want him to sound like a coach that prepares his team to play in the biggest tournament in the world and not a pundit that just makes comments off the cuff. That's what I want him to look like.
All right, Jesse, we're gonna keep moving here, and now we're gonna head over to the big board, send you over to take a look at what we expect the Ghana lineup to be. So let's throw it over to Greg, his baby, and Jesse.
All right, thanks, guys. So we've got the Ghana, basically what we imagine to be the 11 players that are going to be on the field for Ghana. There might be a couple of changes. We'll talk about those in a minute. But Jesse, walk us through the formation and how that works for them.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a guess on some of the players and the formation. I mean, it could look like more of a 4-2-3-1 where Boateng would come over. But regardless of what the exact formation will be, what you'll see is almost a divided team where 5 guys dedicate themselves to defending and 5 guys dedicate themselves to attacking. All right? And now in that, the real keys to what this team does are the 5 attacking players. And so you've got a guy like Andre Ayew who's very aggressive going forward, good left-footed, but also can come inside and create little options, all right? Asamoah Gyan, he is mostly going to occupy himself with the 2 center backs and being a threat behind.
And that's what we saw in 2010 when he was getting in behind the defense a lot.
And he's a guy that maybe doesn't get that many touches and will fall out of the game in certain moments, but you've always got to be aware because he can hit you quick, fast and quick. All right? Then you've got Montari in here, so whether he plays deep or up a little higher, he really plays more side to side and is a connector. Boateng then is a guy who catches balls more in the attacking part, looks to go on the dribble at certain moments, looks to combine with Gyan, looks to combine with different guys. But he's very active and can hit you different ways. Then the other guy is Jordan Ayew, okay? Jordan played against Korea and scored 3 goals and came on in a reserve role and did a very good job. But the other possibility is that they could play Waris. So they've said that Waris got hurt in that Korea game and came out early, but there's reports now that he's training and that he might be ready to go. And he's more of an out-and-out vertical attacker as well.
He's going to be doing that a lot, as much as possible. So, but when they move up, where are the weaknesses in this? Where can the U.S. exploit this little?
Well, as these 5 players start to move into the attack, right, and cause trouble, and they move around a lot, what happens is when the ball turns over, there is space. All right, in this area of the midfield, and a lot of times it's left for just Essien or the outside backs to deal with. So if we can, could you clear that for me, Greg? If we can win the ball and play forward, and play forward quickly into guys like Josie and Clint, and then have our outside backs joining in, have our other players joining in, and maybe catch moments where we're 4v3, 4v4, and now try to catch them on that way. They get caught sometimes ball watching, and if there's good movement and good attacking, they can get caught, and now we can have options at the goal.
And one last thing, you talk about the through balls into those guys. I think also equally important about this space, this is basically where Michael Bradley will have to operate to be successful for the U.S. All right, guys, that's basically a breakdown there of the Ghana lineup. We're going to do the U.S. in a little bit.
All right, one of the guys that we have to point out, and we didn't really get too far into it with the Ghana lineup, is Asamoah Gyan. This is a guy, guys, who really threatens all throughout the game. He threatens you in a bunch of different ways. You look at the statistics. The guy scores goals like it's his job. I guess it is his job, right?
That is his job.
What is the biggest threat about him? Why is he such a threat here?
Well, it's his athleticism and explosiveness, all right? So he's a guy that is really good on the move, and when it comes to foot races, battles in the air, physical duels, he comes out on top almost every time with his athleticism. And then that, along with his mentality to be the difference maker, to be the guy, the cockiness, the confidence to now be the one who wants to score the goals, who wants to make defenders look foolish, that's what makes him so good.
And he's running all 90 minutes. I mean, you never see this guy take a break. Minute 90, he's running at the same speed, which is why I would want to see John Brooks here. I mean, if you brought him to the World Cup and you're going to use him in a game, I know people look at the Germany game and say, yeah, put him there because those are players he knows. But for his athleticism, his ability to recover, when you're going to have to go against the likes of Asamoah Gyan, I think John Brooks makes sense in this game. I wouldn't be surprised to see a surprise move where maybe it's Cameron and Brooks.
Okay, we are going to get to the U.S. lineup shortly. I assure you that consensus is not going to have John Brooks as a starter in this lineup. First, we're going to throw it down to Natal, where Andrew Wiebe is standing by in the rain, of course, with more on what the U.S. national team is doing as they prepare for Ghana.
Thanks, guys. As you can tell, rain coming down here in Natal. It's been that way for the last 3 days, and forecasts call for potentially more of the same on Monday against Ghana. As far as forecasts about what the U.S. will face against the Black Stars, specifics, they're in short supply. Mostly generalities from the players and Jurgen Klinsmann. But the truth is, they know what they're up against. They faced a team in 2010 that featured the likes of Asamoah Gyan and Mike Lessie, and those guys will be in the lineup once again. But a young midfield coming out of Serie A, and Abdul Wadi's up top with Gyan, those are question marks for the Americans. How will they deal with those players? How will they use the scouting reports they've gathered, specifically in Miami when Bertie Votes and Jurgen Klinsmann went down there on Monday? A lot of questions to be answered. Back to you.
Thanks, Andrew. And now we are taking a look at what the U.S., what we expect Jurgen Klinsmann and the U.S. to toss out there on the field. I don't see John Brooks. I do see Greg and Jesse at the big board.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So, we look at this lineup. It's very similar to what we saw against Nigeria in that final friendly before they headed down to Brazil. Walk us through this a little bit, Jesse.
You're not going to say Christmas tree?
Well, you hate the Christmas tree. You hate the term Christmas tree. You hate Christmas, basically.
4, 3, 2, 1, okay? And so the areas of concern for me, especially against Ghana, are, first of all, their ability to play down the wing quickly and now attack us. So that'll be something to keep your eye on, is in build-up, is Ghana able to quickly just get the ball wide into their IU brothers and attack us from the wings close in around our 18? That's a bad thing for us, so please clear that. The other thing to watch is now Clint Dempsey, all right? So in attack, he'll still be more of a forward. But now... Okay, but defensively it'll be interesting to watch whether he is now more up towards Josie or next to Michael, or whether he gets pulled back defensively into wide defensive positions. The more he gets pulled back, then the less of an option he is to go forward when we win the ball, and we don't have him closer to goal to do what he does best. So that'll be something to keep your eye on.
We talked about that space in between, and if he's back here, he's not going to get into that space in between the backs and the midfielders for Ghana. All right, now defensively, though, you and I were talking a little bit before the show about where the U.S. defends becomes vital in this case.
Yeah, and again, another thing to watch is we don't want to see a game where the U.S. back line is primarily on top of its own 18, because that just puts all their attacking players closer to goal, and it means that we're losing the battle of the midfield, all right? What would be better is if we can now see our line of retention from the back line perspective closer to the bottom of the circle, so that now we keep our game compact, and when they start to play into gaps into our midfield, we're able to jump on it, win those balls, play forward quickly, and now get them on transition.
So really quickly, ideally, between the forwards and the back line, how many yards do you think we want to see?
It's got to be tight. It's got to be, I think, between 30 and 40 yards of space, and you've got to keep it tight so they don't have good places to play.
All right, well, a little bit on the lineup there. We're going to talk about some tactics a little bit. Jason, what do you got for us?
Guys, I have some questions coming in from Twitter. James Morgan asks, Cameron is a lock as a starter at center back. So Beasler or Omar, and why? I think we all think that Beasler is a lock. So
not all, me. Obviously not all. We've heard Simon with his choice.
John Brooks is not in the question that I got. So tell me, what do you think? Why is it Beasler? Why is he the answer?
Well, I think ultimately Beasler, because we've seen him again and again and again, both in the qualifying, we saw him in all the friendlies, but also Beasler brings something that Omar Gonzalez really doesn't.
Yes, well, I think that overall his sureness back there and his tactical awareness means that he's a reliable piece, okay? And I know that athletically this game will be a challenge for him. Same with Beckerman. But again, the fact that tactically you know what you're going to get from them, that they're going to be reliable and unlikely to make mistakes, and that they understand the movement of the team, I think is what's going to be more important is, as a team, how do we deal with this game?
But Greg and Jesse, my question is, if we're talking about the U.S., you want them to be closer to the center circle, that defensive line. That's inviting balls over the top. That's inviting runs at you. And isn't that somewhere where maybe Beasler's not at his strongest?
Listen, yeah, you don't want such a high line that you're able to just, as the ball comes further down the field, then the line drops, okay? So it's not so easy to play behind. But what I'd be worried more about is little combinations that lead to the slicing runs and the one-on-ones from wide positions against our center backs, whatever. So again, tight, keep it compact, drop and press with the game, but don't let it turn into a wide open match.
Guys, all right, one more question for you coming in from Twitter. This is from Alyssa. She says, if Kyle Beckerman is exposed due to a lack of pace, and this is a conversation that's been had a lot of times, what other options are there at that position?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen before that Jermaine Jones can drop in here, and his athleticism, people love to talk about that. But, Jesse, talk a little bit about, everyone says pace, and they're often talking about physical pace, but mental pace is just as equal in this case.
Yeah, and again, if the team plays like how I'm speaking, okay, of keeping the game compact, that feeds into Kyle's strengths,
right.
Okay? So that's where he's then able to really read plays and see things quickly and intercept passes, play quickly with Michael Bradley and start the attack that way. He understands his role, and he's very good in that game. But again, if now the approach is that, or if we get stuck playing in a game that's wide open, it tests a lot of our guys, not just Kyle, tests a lot of them.
And arguably you could say that Kyle Beckerman is the one who will end up determining whether it's a wide open game or not for the U.S.
One argument I would make about maybe why Kyle Beckerman is not the player for this game is because we know how the U.S. depends so much on the fullbacks getting up. And if the fullbacks are getting up and now you need to cover for them, it's that guy who's in that position, Beckerman, who's going to have to slide over. I did not see him as mobile a player against Nigeria as I think that guy needs to be in this kind of game, which can be back and forth.
So, Simon, your concern basically is that if Johnson's up here on an overlap and Bedoya is caught up, does Beckerman have what it takes to get out here fast enough, right?
And make that defensive play. I think you need to have your best athletes in this game, which is why I would maybe put Jones where Beckerman is, and then I would have Bedoya and Zusi in the game because I think they're athletically they're two of your best midfielders.
I understand the comment, but still, I think that now when the ball turns over, that Kyle will put himself in a good spot. And you still, this game for me, Jermaine Jones, regardless of whether he plays here or here, is still going to require the same approach. He's going to have to really be aware of that defensive transition and making up the ground defensively to cut things out.
But we saw against Nigeria, it took him a while. When he was pushed up the field, he did not get back immediately.
But Simon, I would also argue that this is why the Christmas tree is the gift that just keeps giving. Because look, when Johnson makes the run forward, the fact that these three are back allows that Bedoya is actually the one who should be filling in this space, not Beckerman necessarily.
And then you get this, you get this, you get this. You know, so it's about balance. It's about balance.
It is.
All right, guys, final question coming in from Twitter, and I think this is a more general one. I kind of like it. Tom Zabo says, why not trust Klinsmann at least a little bit? Spain played its predictable players using old predictable tactics, which is a big reason why they got whipped. Meanwhile, Klinsmann has shed the old predictable, namely Donovan, and is trying to make the U.S. men's national team as unpredictable as possible. I think this is a good question because a lot of people really questioning Klinsmann's motives, questioning the things he's done, but this is kind of giving the other perspective. Is it maybe a good thing?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to talk about the old predictable for Spain. You're looking 4 years ago versus the old predictable over the last year and a half. And I think that the questions about Klinsmann's roster decisions are more about what we've seen over the last year and a half, 2 years, in fact.
Well, and again, it depends on your opponent. When you play against, whether you say Spain now or the old Spain, okay,
right,
they're going to have the ball a lot, and it's going to make your back line be where we talked about, on top of the 18 or near the 18, and your whole team's going to get pushed back. But when we're talking about how we want to defend, and whether it's proactive or not, play to your strengths. Play higher up the field. Make the game in the middle parts, not back here, and then still do what's good for your players and your team, which is still keeping things tight, winning balls, using our mobility to attack.
All right, there's a little bit about the U.S. roster. We're going to get more into the tactics in a little bit.
All right, for now, let's take a look at what the U.S. national team members are saying about their preparation for this Ghana game.
Once we named the 23, we were finally able to focus in on Ghana.
We know it's going to be a hard game. Being the first game of the tournament for both of us, it's going to be filled with a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, I'm sure.
They're skillful, they're strong, they're fast. These guys play at big clubs, so they have a lot of confidence.
They're very good individually, probably a high-tempo team that wants to get forward.
We know their projected lineup. We know they're definitely a very fit team, very strong, but still very technical.
We've been knocked out of the last 2 World Cups by them. And so for us, it's a chance to not only kind of correct that, but also, start our World Cup 2014 on the right foot. And that's with hopefully 3 points. And we want to give ourselves a good basis going into the next 2 games. And so those 90 minutes against Ghana are going to be very, very important.
All right, we've talked about the lineups for both teams, who we expect them to throw out there, but then the question is, how is the game going to play out? Let's go back to the big board with Jesse, Greg, and Greg's baby.
Yeah, here he is, or she is. I'm not sure what this might be. Well, actually, we've done a lot of talking about the defensive side for the U.S., but what happens when they do have the ball and they're trying to push in the attack? Walk us through a little bit here.
Yeah, well, you're going to see, again, the diamond formation in the midfield when they build up. So Michael Bradley will start to move ahead of the ball. And then when the ball is here, you'll start to see the same thing where we push our outside backs up. We start to get rotations in the midfield, right? We have Clint and Josie closer to goal looking to be available in these pockets. But what we really have to be aware of is spreading ourselves out. And what's going to be important is that the U.S. does not lose balls in this part of the field. So when you're watching the game, pay attention to all these little combinations in here, and they have to be really smart about not losing the balls, because that's when, clear it for me, please, or here. That's when now you'll start to see Andre Ayew, and you'll start to see Jordan Ayew and Asamoah Gyan start to put themselves ahead of the ball to really be on the move, okay? And then in those moments as well, we have to make sure that if we now choose to push Fabian Johnson when we have the ball in attack, that now Beasley starts to give us some cover in here, that Jermaine Jones at times does, and that when we attack from the wing, that we're not attacking with 7 guys, but we're attacking more with 4 guys so that we continue to have balance for the counter.
But if we attack with 4, obviously you're not going to get much of an attack out of it. We saw that Ghana's going to attack with 5, and they're going to defend with 5. Attacking with 4, we're never going to beat that 5, though.
No, actually, I think, again, if there are good combinations and good ideas, and we show up in the right spaces, that again, the Ghanaian defenders they ball watch a lot, and they get caught now where things happen behind them. So I think if the timing is good and the movement is good, even if we don't have numbers up, we're still going to find chances and we're going to find goals.
Look, one of the things we're talking about, turnovers in the middle of the field. I think one thing to look at, when the ball does turn over, are you fouling right away? And I think the U.S. has not done that in the past. There are moments where you look at them and a turnover happens and you foul right there, foul right there. I think even in 2010, there may have been instances like that. And you need to see the U.S. Take a card, but you got to foul.
You really have no faith in the U.S. being able to hold their positioning and to hold their shape, though, if you're assuming that they automatically have to foul. You're going right to the fact that they need to foul. So you have no faith, it seems, that these guys can continue to hold their shape when the ball is pushed forward for the US.
I don't think you don't want to give Ghana a rhythm where now when the ball turns over, they have a feel about how they break. I think you want to just interrupt any idea that they have that they can be successful by using the foul.
I would throw this out also. I mean, my biggest fear in this game, honestly, is that early yellow card to Kyle Beckerman. Because if he gets that yellow card in the first 10, 20 minutes of the game, that's a dicey situation for the rest of the match where you're going to need him to erase a mistake at some point, and he's not going to be able to do it if he's on a yellow card already.
It's all of the above, okay? It's being smart in possession. It's when you have possession, being balanced defensively. It's now making sure that when the ball turns over that Gyan isn't wide open for the first pass. It's fouling early. It's not getting cards. It's doing it all, but it's doing it all at such a high level that we're able to apply our tactics and our approach to the game in a way that makes us the better team on the day.
Yeah, and I think you're right when you say, John. I think the biggest concern, and Simon, you mentioned this a little bit, is that this guy's going to take off like this. Every time that they get the ball back here, that's what he's going to do. He's going to take off and try and catch Cameron and Beasley. Yeah.
And honestly, that's going to put a lot more on Tim Howard, and we saw him get his 100th cap. I think that's one of the advantages that the U.S. team has, is that experienced goalkeeper who can come out there and maybe be good about erasing those mistakes, getting to those through balls, anticipating it a little better, and that's going to be important for the U.S. in this game. But we also looked at what would be the deciding matchup of this game. If there's one matchup that could decide how this game goes, what is that matchup? And I think we all agreed that it is going to be Andre Ayew against Fabian Johnson. We've seen how important of a player Fabian Johnson is to this national team. So tell me your thoughts on how this matchup plays out and why it's so important, Simon.
Well, I think it depends on how we define success in this matchup. And while Fabian Johnson may contain Andre Ayew, if that means that Fabian Johnson is sitting back and having to really get locked in and into that defensive position and not joining the attack, then Ghana has essentially won that matchup.
Yeah, and along with seeing the positioning or the heat map of where Fabian Johnson is in the game and where Andre Ayew is in the game, still an important aspect of the U.S. in the attack is getting Fabian Johnson forward, okay? So if Andre Ayew goes with him a lot and we turn him into a defender, that's a good thing, all right? But if he chooses to let him go and let Asamoah deal with him, passing him on, we got to make sure that Andre Ayew isn't just standing in space on the left wing so that when the ball turns over, it can go to him and then they can start attacking. So along with where they are on the field is how we adjust when Fabian Johnson goes forward.
Well, one quick thing on that, and I'll ask this of you, Jesse, is if it's so important to get Fabian Johnson into the attack, should we be discussing the defensive responsibilities and defensive abilities of Andre Bedoya in the cover a little bit more? Because I feel like we don't talk about them. Is he good enough defensively to cover when Johnson gets forward on the overlap?
Well, the main reason why I think that we're going to see Bedoya in that space instead of Zusi is because his pure mobility and relentlessness and ability to get up and down the field makes him a better fit. And when we need him to come back and help defend in certain areas, he's got a good mentality to do it, and he's physically able to do it. So I think that's a better fit.
But Greg mentions Alejandro Bedoya. I think for Fabian Johnson to be effective pushing up, Bedoya has to be with him. They have to combine. So that's what, to me, makes it a little scary in terms of the gap left.
All right, guys, before we go, I'm going to get your predictions, but there are more questions that have come in from Twitter. So I want to get to some of these, and one of them might be about Alejandro Bedoya amongst a few other of the teams, other of the players. Corey on Twitter says, could the lack of World Cup experience actually help the U.S. men's national team against Ghana? I mean, it's kind of that question of, is it a young players tournament? We've heard people say that before. It's a experienced man's game. It's a young players tournament. I just made that up. I think that's what the quote is.
All right, I'll take that.
But does it help?
Well, I think more importantly, what it feeds into is some of the fearlessness. Okay, and I would think that, listen, that's our American mentality. If you're going to talk about now the belief and everything else, is to not play afraid. And so we want a team as Americans that goes out on the field and gives everything they have and pours their hearts out, you know? And then at the end, if they wind up slipping up here or there, we can forgive that as long as they make us proud. And
I assure you that our studio audience is more than one, but only one is willing to give us
at
the
any
applause
one time
when Jesse says something about the USA.
If you think pouring your heart out against Ghana is going to be enough, the U.S. will be vilified after this game.
I believe.
If for the third straight World Cup they lose to Ghana. I have no doubt about it.
But what if they get out of the group? What if they get out of the group and they lose to Ghana?
That's what they're going to hope. They better hope they get out of the group.
Saying, it's one game at a time. Don't take the tournament as a whole. Right now we play Ghana, okay? Let's pour everything we have into that game and then we'll reevaluate.
All right, let me ask you this, because I'm going to go along with that. And John Baralone maybe, asks via Twitter, what helps the U.S. more, speaking of game by game, a Portugal win, tie, or loss against Germany? And remember, that game is played at noon the day that the U.S. are playing tomorrow on Monday. So the U.S. will know the result of that game ahead of time. What should U.S. fans be rooting for in that game?
It's about whether you want Germany to have something to play for at the end, right?
Yes, and I think if you're saying Germany's the best in the group, then I think you want Germany to wipe up on the other teams, and then we play them and then can play for a draw maybe at that point. Or, Germany maybe fields a different team because they don't need the result as much. So I think you want Germany to clean up.
And potentially Cristiano Ronaldo to get a red card, maybe?
Yeah, I mean,
you could only dream, right?
I say bring it on. Give us their best players.
Yeah. All right. This was another interesting question that came in from Daniel Egner. He says, after the Drogba boost last night, which really, I got to be honest with you, hurt me because I was rooting for Japan. They were kind of my second or third team in the tournament that I was rooting for, and that hurt last night. After the Drogba boost last night, does it worry you that the U.S. doesn't have a spark on the bench? #no Landon.
I think they do have sparks. I think Mix Diskerud and Aaron Johansson have shown that coming off the bench, they do give a lift to the attack. So I think they do have that effect. Now, you're looking for something more psychological. You're looking for more, and I don't know that Landon was that player. Didier Drogba has a lot of charisma. I'm not sure, and Jesse obviously was in the locker room with Landon. I don't get the feel that Landon had that charisma, at least not at this stage of his career.
But Simon, that's not the psychological lift that you get from Landon. When Didier Drogba came on the field against Japan, the whole stadium lifted up, not just his team and his play. The whole stadium was amped up because, in many ways, the Ivorian fans got really excited that their star was on the field, and the neutrals in the stadium got excited because here's a player that they definitively knew. There aren't that many players on the U.S. roster or even in the U.S. fold that the neutrals at this game against Ghana will know. So Landon is one of those guys. It would lift the stadium to bring him in.
I agree with all this, but we've got to move past Landon.
Yes,
right?
well said.
We've got to talk about our team now, and I do think there's guys on the bench that can help out. I like the roster other than Landon not being on it, and I think that each one of these guys can provide a service.
We got a lot of questions about Julian Green. Anyone expect to see Julian Green at the World Cup?
I don't.
Okay, I mean, they're going to cut away to him maybe on the bench, but do you expect to see him on the field?
The only way you might see him is if either the U.S. does so well in a certain game and they put him on the field at the end for experience, or they don't do well enough and now that last game is meaningless.
All right. Obviously, we got to get to predictions before we head out today. I'm going to start with Greg. Greg, we've seen you pick with your heart before many times. We've also seen you pick Mexico to win the World Cup.
That was picking with my head.
What do you have? It looked good after game one. What do you have in this game? Who you
a 1-0 victory against Cameroon?
They scored 3 goals, Greg.
They did score 3 goals.
3-0.
You know what? I think that these are two teams that are very different in their styles and what they bring to the field. However, I think they're actually very evenly matched, and I think it's going to end up 1-1.
Jesse, what do you have?
Don't like that, huh?
Well, I've approached this World Cup for the most part from my head, and it hasn't helped me that much in some of the early results. And you know what? When I start watching the games, I don't care what I pick. I'm not a prognosticator. I'm a coach, but I'm also a fan. Mm-hmm. And when I watch the games, I root for the teams that I want to win. And guess what? I want the U.S. to win.
Woo! All right.
So I'm taking them 2-1, and I'm getting goals from Altidore and Dempsey, and I want to see the guys come through.
That's like the perfect scenario. Altidore scores, Dempsey scores.
Everything you need to make everybody happy. And what comes next is what makes everybody angry. Simon!
Why do you come to me last? You know I'm going to be the downer.
It's the order it went in.
We know it's going to be a tight game. We know it's going to be a physical game. I think it's going to be tight, but decided on 1 or 2 plays. And I think the Ghanaians are faster, they're stronger, they're more physical, and they're more technical. They're going to make the plays. I think the U.S. lose 2-1.
That's the
you know the 2-0 that U.S. has.
Yeah.
That U.S. has with Mexico. Ghana has a 2-1.
They don't speak Spanish.
Well done, Simon. All right, there you have it. We have a draw, a win, and a loss. And I could be the tiebreaker here, but I probably won't. Simon, you know what?
Well, put your name on the line.
Our fans out there that are watching on YouTube notice that your beer has not moved the entire time. I should have made you drink that before you made the pick.
I'm so full of those caipirinhas.
I think he is drunk.
I have all those. You didn't actually drink that. That was mine.
We want to thank everyone for joining us here on Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage. It was a lot of fun. We're going to do this throughout the tournament ahead of the U.S. games. Don't forget, you can comment on this video. If we use your comments in the next shows that we do, you'll win some cool Castrol World Cup swag. We've already given away a ton of it on this show. We look forward to doing this again ahead of the U.S.-Portugal game. And hopefully the U.S. is on 3 points at that time. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the match on Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern time.
USA, USA, USA,
USA, USA.